Good afternoon. I see that the stream paused on me momentarily just before I started. Let's hope that is not a bad omen. Anyway, good afternoon. This is your Friday afternoon AI training session. Thank you to Gordon for the previous session on using timecode in Titan. I learnt a few tricks there myself, as did a few of our regulars down in the chat. Today we're going to be looking at external control with AI. So by external control, I'm talking about a few different things here. I am talking about MIDI timecode control, MIDI controller control, ArtNet control, and possibly even OSC control if we get time. So first of all, let's have a look at timecode, because that's probably one of the most common kinds of control that we get used with the server. So the first thing we need to do, we need to enable or at least expose our timecode controller in the system, and then we need to assign some timecode triggers. So what do I mean by triggers? So in AI, timecode, let's get the timecode widget up so that if you're not familiar with timecode, so I'm going into the system settings. Yeah, so if you're not familiar with timecode, you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. Okay, so this widget that I've just opened through the system settings is the timecode widget. And you see these red numbers here at the top. They're 4 groups of numbers. We've got hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, because in video world we deal with frames. Now what we can do is we can set a unique time for different pieces of media to be triggered. So when the clock reaches that time, the appropriate piece of media will be played back. We've got 2 methods of playback in AI. We can either use the timecode value purely as a trigger, which means that once the clock gets to that point, it sends out a signal to the clip to start it playing. Or we can actually lock the timecode clips, the clips to the time code. Now the difference between these two, when it's just a trigger, as long as you receive the trigger to the piece of media, then the piece of media will start, and then it will use the machine's own internal clock to keep playing. Whereas when it's locked to timecode, the video can only progress to its next frame when the next frame information is received from the timecode clock. Now, the downside to this, obviously, if your timecode clock stops, then all of your media stops. But the plus side is that you can restart from any point in your timecode. You don't have to go back to where the trigger is. So we find that locked to timecode can be more useful in situations like theatres, where you might have really big, say 10-minute chunks of video, and if for some reason you have to stop in the middle of an act, maybe there's a fire alarm or something, you don't want to have to rewind the show to the last trigger. You want to be able to continue. But a lot of shows prefer not to have that locked to time code system, because they just want the trigger and they just want things to start around there at the same time. Anyway, let's get assigning some timecode triggers and see how we do it. Just trying to choose ones that are a little bit different so we can see what's going on. And maybe one of those. Oh, that's the same one. One of those, that's great. Okay. I'm just going to move those with Control X. There we go. Okay. So there are a couple of different ways to input your timecode values for the clips. We can either do it from this front interface, which is quite a nice way of doing it, but it means you have to know the keyboard shortcuts. The benefit is that we can see all of the timecode values at the same time. Or if we right-click on one of our clips, we can actually, on the left here, we've got timecode trigger as a value box, so we can enter a value in there. And the default value is 24000000, and that's because it's an impossible time. So if you think about a 24-hour clock, you never actually you never actually see 24000000 on a clock. It goes from 0 to 23, 59, 59, and however many frames. Thank you for the link there, Tom. Good afternoon to you, my friend. Okay, so we can input the value here. Now, if I just go back to this page, I'm going to do it all on this page just because it's easier to see what's going on. So I'm going to choose this clip on the right first of all because I'm actually concerned that my text is not going to show easily on here, but we'll see how we get on. So on this page, if I press the home button on my keyboard, it brings up at the top of these clips. I'm not sure how easy that's going to be to see on the broadcast. It's given me a set of dashes, meaning that there is no value entered. So then I can use, if we select the clip first, that would be helpful. I can use the page up and page down buttons to adjust my frames, shift page up and page down to adjust my seconds, control page up and page down to do my minutes, and shift control page up and down to do my hours. Now I'm just going to bring this all the way down to 0. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to timecode a couple of these clips, and I'm going to run an internal timecode generator just to confirm they do what we think. So I set this first clip to a timecode value of 0, then the second clip, let me just bring that all the way down. There we go. I've put the second one to start at 3 seconds. I'll put that one on to 6 seconds. And the last one I'm going to put on 9 seconds. There we go. Okay, cool. So I don't think you're going to be able to see that text easily on the web stream at all, but the top of each clip is showing its timecode trigger value. Okay, so I've got my timecode widget here in the project, but we have two states. It can be in the project, but then we actually activate it, and only when it's activated will it start working. You can see that I've not got a timecode trigger clock running, but because it's at 0, that clip that I triggered, that I set to come in at 0, has come in there. Let's just turn that off for a moment. I'm going to use, we've got an internal timecode generator in AI system settings, so I'm just going to use that to generate timecode. It's not really ideal for running a whole show on, but it's quite good for sort of programming and getting some stuff in there. Okay, so in order to use my internal timecode, I am going to, on the left, on the timecode settings, the MIDI settings, I'm going to just change a couple of things up. So down at the bottom here, we've got generate, near the bottom, about 2/3 of the way down, generate internal timecode clock. I'm going to enable that one, so that's active. And then hopefully, when I press my start button down here, my play button down here, sorry, we should see these go through. I'm also going to take my crossfade off because I've only got them on for 3 seconds each, and there's a 2-second crossfade by default, so I've put that to 0, so they should snap in. Okay, so I'm going to activate my widget. I'm just going to do it through here, in fact, same as doing it on the widget itself. And then I am going to press my play button. I'm going to drag that out of the way. There we go. So we can see that timecode changing. At 3, one came in. At 6, we get another. Then at 9, we get another. Okay, so that's working nicely. So we can see how timecode triggering works. Let's just stop that timecode generator for a moment. Now I did mention that we can be locked to frames as well as just having a trigger. So the mode I've just set it up in, I'm using the normal play modes. I'm going to right click on this clip. I'm just using a standard loop mode. That's the same as just using the timecode as a trigger. If I use the MTC play mode, this clip will lock to the frames. As an accompaniment to that, in the system settings, which, oh, that's the wrong button. There we go. In the system settings, we've got freewheel timecode. That's basically what I'm describing. So when it's just a trigger, it's in freewheel mode, or we can enable it universally so that everything is locked to timecode. There are a couple of other useful settings in here as well. If you're using an AI media server, you've got use LTC timecode as an option. So most of our media servers now have dedicated audio timecode input ports. So if you're using one of those, if you give that button a press so that it says using LTC, otherwise the default is to use MTC. Always make sure your timecode base rate matches the one that you are receiving, and you'll see a red light. The FPS will show in red if it mismatches with the incoming clock. Okay, so timecode triggering, nice and simple. Set it per clip. You can either right click on the clip to enter the value, or you can enter the value using the shortcut keys. If you can't remember the shortcut keys, this keyboard icon at the top, let's give that a press. Okay, that's probably not the easiest way to understand it, in fact. Okay, let's go to the manual instead for that one. So at the end of the manual, there's a load of keyboard shortcuts. Let's just go up. We've got one for each page. Performance page. There we go. Okay, so this section here is all about the timecode shortcuts. In fact, that section there, yeah, backwards and forwards. So you've got the combinations that I did there. Page, so it's home to show them, page up and page down to move up or down, shift and page up or down, control page up and down, and control shift page up and down. The manual is always there. You can always access it with the question mark logo at the top. Good afternoon to Charlie and Bernice, who have joined us today. Good to have you both with us, and Naveen as well, and Corey. Okay, so MIDI timecode, that's nice and easy. Let's think about if we want to get a MIDI trigger in. So maybe you want to actually have a MIDI note triggering clips. It could be coming from a sequencer or a MIDI controller or something like that. So again, first of all, we're going to go into our system settings. Now, we have a couple of ways that we can use MIDI controllers, and we like to have a dedicated controller to trigger clips. So in that MIDI section, we have Media Tiles Device. It's set to AI MIDI, so that when it says AI MIDI, that's looking for a dedicated 5-pin DIN MIDI port on one of our servers. Otherwise, any other controller that you've got plugged in should show up. Plug your controllers in before running the software. So I've got a Nano Control keyboard controller that I'm using here, so I'm just going to select that as my Media Tiles Device. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to press another shortcut. This one is Control M, M for MIDI. So I press that, and then this currently selected clip has a hatched line around the edge, which is showing in purple. Now if I press a key on my controller, it will assign that value to that controller. So I'm then going to just select the next one and press Control M, and actually now I can see the value assigned to that first one there. So press one on there. There we go. And then I'm just going to do that third one. Control M, press my control. There we go. So now, hopefully, yeah. So as I press my controls on my controller, I can trigger my clips like so. Okay. So that can be quite nice. What I often do is I try and make my banks a set amount of pieces of media, or not exceeding an amount of media, and then I use a controller like a launch pad or something like that with it, and you can have a dedicated sort of clip triggering system then. Okay, so clip triggering, that's all good and well. Maybe we want to control things like our layer intensity. So normally we'd come up here to our interface and adjust our intensity, but maybe we want that on our MIDI controller as well. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to double click on the layer, and then we've got this button here which is Open ArtNet Layer. We're going to open that one up. Tom is asking if they need to be note ons to trigger the clips. That is a good question. They do need to be notes, MIDI note ons to trigger clips. It ignores the end, it ignores the note off. It's the note on which is important. And as we are also alluding to here, they can't be continuous controllers to trigger clips. There are ways to do that through Salvation, but through the interface, it's notes. Okay, oh, wrong mouse there. Okay, so I'm going to press Open ArtNet Layer on here. So don't be intimidated by this window at all. This is the potential 100 parameters per layer. They actually go off the bottom of my screen there because of the way I'm cropping this for the broadcast. So another way is you can come in here. So I wanted to control my intensity there, and I can find my intensity in the list, and I can confirm that by just adjusting that controller next to it. So if I want to control this controller, all I need to do, if I right click on the controller, and I've actually got two options. I can edit the MIDI map or the ArtNet map. We'll come back to ArtNet in a moment. So let's go into the MIDI map. Then I can select my MIDI device. If I'm using a specific MIDI channel, I can choose it there, or Omni looks at all channels. I can press my Learn button next to the controller number, or I've got keys here, so I can make a keyboard range. But I'm going to use a controller. So I press Learn, and I'm going to move a fader on my controller, and it's picked it up. In fact, what I'm going to do there, I'm going to use a different one, because the one I used had a value of 0. There you go. You can see it just picked up the 1 there, because that's channel 1, continuous controller 1. With these MIDI boxes, you have to remember to close them using the briefly. I'm not going to go too deeply into console, because I'm not the best person to show that all to you. But let's have a quick think anyway. I'm just going to open my system settings for this. So obviously we can take console control. So that could just be a standard set of ArtNet signals. It could be patched as a CITP media server, or it could be using the full Synergy system of integration with other Avolites products. I'm not going to go over the how and why of connection right now. That's a subject for another time. If you're using, however, just a standard fixture or a CITP fixture to control AI from a console, you do need to make a couple of decisions before you do any patching. So you've got to make sure that your ArtNet adapter that you've specified is the correct one to connect to the console. It has to be on the same IP range. We would recommend a 2 or a 10. If you're using a CITP system, choose your CITP adapter, which is usually going to be the same adapter as your network adapter. You would then choose your personality mode. So I mentioned just now that we had up to 100 channels of control per layer. Some people don't want all of those channels, so we have an option of when you patch, you can specify whether you're using 40, 80 or 100 channels. At this point, I would then, if I was just doing a normal fixture, we should then be able to connect on the console. If I'm doing a CITP fixture, I would then need to enable my CITP like so. The one thing I haven't shown you there is how to set the offset channels for your layers. So if we double click on a layer, on our layer controller, down at the bottom here we have the starting universe and channel for this specific layer. So if I go through my layers, we'll see the next one starts at 101. I don't think I've offset this one, no. So I could then come into here and I could actually set that to 201 and so on. If you're using Synergy, you don't have to worry about the ArtNet channels or anything like that. You don't have to put in any offsets. The system will just know what you're doing and make it easy for you. Okay, so that is our sort of our basic interface control. I'm going to spend the last 15 minutes touching a little bit of salvation. So again, don't be intimidated by this stuff if you're not familiar with it. What I'm going to do, let's think about this. I'm going to bring my stage patch forwards for this part. Let me just do that. Okay. In fact, yeah, let's do it in there. Okay. So I am going to go in a different way there. That window's not quite showing as I would expect it to show me. There we go. Let's go up a layer. Interesting. Okay, let's just go for it in here then. So we have seen that we could do in Salvation itself that we could come in and we can use things like assigning MIDI. We can also do that same with ArtNet as well. We could put in network values and universe and channels so that you could patch one very specific function. Now, there are some modules that are really useful for bringing external control data in. Sometimes you'll find that maybe the thing you want to control hasn't automatically had a parameter. Continuous controller inputs. We have key inputs as well, so that's for your notes, or CCs are for your controllers. We've also, in the network section, we have, in fact I should be adding these, shouldn't I? Let's go back. MIDI CC in. Let's just go MIDI key in. We also, in the network section, we have ArtNet input. The large one is basically just the small one with a lot more preset inputs in it, so I'm just going to load this small one. And then new to AI, we have an OSC module, which does still require a little bit of patching. I realise we have two parts to it there, but I will explain very briefly how it works. So we have a receiver, and we have a receiver manager. I'm going to just put that there for the moment. Let me just make that window a little bit bigger, and let's just bring those. Let's bring those over there. Okay, so let's very briefly look at the MIDI modules. They kind of work as you'd expect. You've got drop down so you can select the device that's in use. You've got learn buttons. They're set up so they can actually do a couple of sets of parameters at a time. And then essentially what you do, they give out blue data, so they're going to connect to a blue port. You would just connect that. I'm going to throw myself in something which has something that I can connect to. There we go. So I can just drag a connection like so. Obviously only one thing can connect to an input port at a time, so dragging that one there will replace that one. The ArtNet one is very, very simple. 2 channels on this one. Setting your channels, set your overall universe and your network adapter. Now the one that is of interest to me, which we have just added to the software, is an OSC set of OSC modules. So I've started to work and produce something in Ableton. I'm making some Max for Live devices that will work sort of like a fixture does on a console, but within Ableton Live. In my tests I've actually had OSC running from Ableton the other day and controlling AI. I'll build a nice patch, I'll get it released. Essentially what you do, you can only have one receiver manager per project. The receiver manager looks out for a specific port. So when you're sending OSC, you send it on a user specified port. I'm going to go for 4567, randomly chosen port number there. We would then choose our network adapter, like so, and we would enable receive, and you can see that the receiver manager is now in a position where it can receive data. Now when you create OSC messages, you create, it's not done with numbers, it's done with words. Well, it's not strictly, but often, commonly it's done with words just because it's easier to understand. And so you've got all these different data types coming down your OSC port, but each of them has a label. And so what you can do here is, rather than having all of the data types coming through, in here we could type a specific label. Note 1 was one that I was using the other day, and so then any messages with the prefix note 1 will come through to this module, like so. So then if I wanted, coming off that same single receiver, I could also have so I'm working on some color controls, so I've got red 1 and so on. And you can feed loads of these off of a single port number, but you can actually run 5 different port numbers at a time, so there's loads of scope for loads of stuff to go on there. Okay, good afternoon to Iranda there as well. Okay, so I am... Yes, in fact, there's another useful thing I can show you relating to some Salvation stuff. One of the downsides of MIDI. MIDI is a 7-bit protocol, so it only goes from a value range of 0 to 127. It has 128 steps. By comparison, DMX is 8-bit, so you get one more step, which actually gives you 0 to 255. But sometimes you actually sort of want more control range than 0 to 127, because actually it's not that high resolution an amount, especially if you're maybe moving things in video world. We've got 1920 pixels, so ideally you want a larger number of values. So there is a system patch that we've made that will either use two values to make a 14-bit value, basically. I've really confused myself for a moment there. So I'm going to right click and I am going to do insert system patch, and up at the top here there are the patches that I use. Now I actually made these for DMX, but it's really easy. I'm saying that and I'm wondering if I've got the right versions in here. Let's see if we go into there. There we go. I've got a real feeling that I've just sent this on a complete lemon. Now I have. I'm going to ignore that. Let's forget that for a moment. I'm going to update. I think it's the one that I put on the group the other day, and rather in here, I will update that. It is possible to combine MIDI numbers together, basically, to make higher values. Okay. So time has actually flown quicker for me today than I was expecting to. So I think this will be a sensible time for me to throw open the floor to any questions or anything. They don't have to be specifically related to external control, but if they are with external control, that is all good. Whilst I am seeing if we have any questions, we do have our website, on our website avolites.com. We've got a page called Online Resources. And so the online resources page, he says, there we go, the online resources page, here we go, we keep a timetable of the upcoming Titan and AI lessons. You've got myself on there, you've got Gordon on there, you've got Cade, who is one of our American trainers, one of the Group 1 crew, and any other ones we'll throw on there that could be of interest. There's some links down the bottom there as well for versions of AI and Titan which can run without the need for an AVO key. So if you do want to try stuff out in demos at home, you are able to. Okay, so let's go back to that one there. I'm liking OBS Studio. I'm using OBS Studio to do all my transitions. I've got everything is coming into my broadcast computer over NDI. And then I set up compositions in OBS. It's really nice. I like it a lot. Let's go back to our interface there. There's a thing actually. There is another type of external control that I've forgotten to tell you about there because it's new. We have Pioneer Pro DJ Link support in AI as of AI 12.1, which came out yesterday. So the first thing we need to do, we need to press F4 to get our tap tempo, our BPM widget up. Sorry, it used to be called the tap tempo widget because it was just the tap tempo. So by default it comes up onto this screen here. The drop down here for tap, if we go down to there, we can see Pro DJ Link. Select that from the drop down. So Pro DJ Link is a way that certain Pioneer CDJs and mixers can share tempo data along with other information across a network, and then authorized devices, so in our case AI, that could also be Titan. Titan is also authorized to work with Pro DJ Link. We can then look at those incoming tempos and readjust timings in real time. So in AI terms, what this means, what I'm going to show you with the tap tempo button. I think I need to actually engage tap tempo in my system settings as well. Yeah, there we go, just down the bottom left there, enabled. Let's just give you a quick example with a clip here. I'm going to just put this to a smaller amount of beats. So I've just turned the tap tempo stuff on, the beats on with that switch there. Now when I trigger this, okay, this is cool, I can see it's running a bit fast. If I do a slower tap, you can see that has gone and slowed down a bit there. If I do it really manically, it should speed up. There we go. So you can see that we can have tempo control over the playback speed of a clip. So if I go back to the Pro DJ link, so obviously I don't have a set of decks here, so I can't show the full thing, and it has to have the decks in the network for this to work. If I click on the Show Waves button, what we'd see in real time here, we'd see those waveforms which are being transmitted from the devices. We'd see things like the tempo, we'd see the current timecode value, the current time value of that song, of the playhead within the song, and then we can come in and we can actually choose which of those layers, so we refer to them as layers 1, 2, 3 and 4, we can choose which of those layers is sending the tap tempo data essentially to the clip. So as the DJ adjusts the pitch control on his decks, our clips will slow down or speed up accordingly. The offset value there is just really to account for any sort of network latency. It's a really quick protocol. You probably won't see any bad latency, but in case you do, you can put an offset so that things just come in a little bit before they do. Okay, so I think I am probably about there for today on my bits and pieces. Let's have a quick think about what we have got coming up next week, because we've got quite a few weeks planned now. Later today, of course, you've got the mighty Mr. Cade. Cade is going to be talking about show import and fixture mapping and user settings. So that's coming up at 9 PM UK time. So that, for reference, it's just gone 5 o'clock now, so it's in about 4 hours. He's over in America. Then coming up on Monday, you have me at 3:30. I'm going to be talking about preparing media for AI. So we'll look at things like the built-in transcoder. We'll also have a look at things like using some Adobe products to prepare your media, and probably something like MPEG Streamclip or a freeware piece of software for converting your media. Then Cade will be following me at 9 o'clock again that night with Titan, networking, multi-user, backup and DMX merge. Okay, so thank you very much for tuning in on this fine day. I am just going to leave it. There we go. Good question. So, question from Tom there is relating to Pioneer Pro DJ Link. Do you get a master tempo from the mix, or is it a separate? I can see that my internet briefly gave up there. I thought I defeated this last week. We'll just keep going with it. Okay, so I'm going to leave this open for a few minutes. The video will be on the Avolites page a bit later, so if you want to, you can check back and have a look. If you have any further questions, you can of course get in touch with us at support@avolitesmedia.com or in the dedicated Facebook page. Sorry, I'm trying to read messages at the same time. See, my brain is getting old now, and I struggle a little bit when I'm trying to read two computers, a Facebook chat and incoming messages at the same time, and make sure that OBS is still working. Brilliant. Okay, so I am going to call it a day for there. Thank you very much for tuning, and I do hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you very much, and have a merry weekend.